The silence is what strikes first. Not the absence of sound, Brooklyn never sleeps after all, but the quality of it. Inside the Metropolitan Detention Center, beyond the triple reinforced walls and the electronic surveillance grid, there exists a silence so profound it seems to devour memory itself. It is the silence of erasure, of men who once commanded nations reduced to numbers on a steel door. And on this 16th day of January 2026, that silence wraps around one particular inmate like a burial shroud. 3 weeks ago, the same man stood on a balcony in Caracas, his voice amplified through speakers that reached 500,000 throats. The plaza below him was a sea of red berets and raised fists, the thunder of devotion so loud it drowned out the sound of American jets circling overhead. His elite guard surrounded him then, 300 of the most loyal, most feared operatives in the hemisphere, men who would die at his gesture, who had killed at his command. They wore their allegiance like armor, their weapons polished to a mirror shine, their eyes scanning the crowds with the predatory awareness of wolves protecting their alpha. That was 3 weeks ago. Swahi, that was another lifetime. Now, 4 U.S. Marshals control his every movement. Not 300 warriors. 4 bureaucrats in tactical gear. Men who view him not as a titan, but as a logistical problem to be solved. A package to be delivered. A liability to be contained. They do not salute him. They do not fear him. They simply process him with the cold efficiency of men who have transported hundreds of high-value prisoners and will transport hundreds more after he is forgotten. The weight of the handcuffs is precise. 3 pounds according to the manufacturer's specifications. Standard issue steel with a double lock mechanism to prevent tightening during transport. He can feel every ounce of those 3 pounds. A constant reminder that his wrists no longer belong to him. They have measured him, calibrated him, reduced him to acceptable parameters of restraint. The shackles around his ankles add another 2 pounds, connected by an 18-inch chain that allows him to shuffle but never stride, to move but never march. They do not allow him to forget what he has become. The journey that brought him to this cell, to this moment, to this particular quality of silence, began in darkness. Midnight, to be precise. 0100 hours on December 28th, when the USS Iwo Jima sat 3 miles off the Venezuelan coast, its deck bathed in the infrared glow of equipment invisible to the naked eye. He was brought up from below in a blackout hood, the kind used for extraordinary renditions, the fabric treated with chemicals that prevented any light from penetrating. Even if he had opened his eyes, and the marshals later reported that he kept them squeezed shut the entire time, he would have seen nothing but absolute darkness. The helicopter that lifted him from the carrier's deck was a Ghost Hawk, a variant of the Black Hawk modified for electronic warfare and low observable operations. Its rotors had been engineered to reduce acoustic signature by 40%. As it climbed into the Caribbean night, vectoring northwest toward the mainland United States, it left barely a whisper in its wake. But the true genius of the operation wasn't the helicopter itself. It was the flight path. Technical humiliation. That is what the intelligence analysts called it in their classified briefing to the National Security Council. Because while the Ghost Hawk transported one dethroned autocrat across international waters, a coordinated network of electronic warfare assets created a phantom corridor through the digital battlefield. 4 EA-18 Growlers flew parallel courses, their jamming pods broadcasting false signals across every frequency band. A compass call EC-130 orbited the operational area, spoofing GPS coordinates and generating ghost radar returns. To anyone watching, and they knew the Russians were watching, knew the Cubans were watching, knew loyalist elements with access to satellite imagery were watching, the aircraft carrying the prisoner appeared to be everywhere and nowhere, multiplying across the electromagnetic spectrum like a quantum particle, refusing to collapse into a single observable state. They scrambled him. Not just his location, but the very concept of his location. By the time the Ghost Hawk touched down at a secure airfield in New Jersey, a facility so classified it does not appear on any aviation chart, civilian or military, his own intelligence apparatus, the networks he had built over 2 decades of authoritarian rule, had logged 17 different possible landing sites across 6 states. The Russian Signals Intelligence Station in Lourdes, Cuba, which had been reactivated specifically to track his transfer, reported with high confidence that he had landed in South Carolina. The GRU believed he was in Virginia. His own elite guard remnants, monitoring every channel they could access, became convinced he had been taken to a Supermax facility in Colorado. He was in New Jersey, in a hangar built during the Cold War to house nuclear-armed aircraft, now repurposed for a different kind of deterrence. And he was alone in a way that men of power rarely experience until power abandons them. The convoy that would carry him into Brooklyn was assembled with a precision that bordered on paranoia. 23 vehicles. That was the final count. At the front, 2 NYPD cruisers with every light extinguished, their radios linked to an encrypted federal network that bypassed all local dispatch. Behind them, a Lenco Bearcat armored vehicle painted in federal gray, its hull rated to withstand 50 caliber armor-piercing rounds. Then, the prisoner transport itself, a retrofitted SWAT vehicle with reinforced passenger compartment and run-flat tires, windows replaced with ballistic steel plates. Behind that, another Bearcat, followed by 4 unmarked Suburbans carrying the tactical response team. Behind them, mobile electronic warfare vans disguised as commercial trucks, their interiors packed with equipment that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. And finally, a tail of 6 more vehicles, creating a rolling perimeter that extended 200 meters in every direction. The convoy formed up at 0400 hours. The prisoner was loaded into the transport vehicle while still hooded, still shackled, still processed like cargo. They did not remove the hood until the convoy was moving. And when they finally did, the first thing he saw through the narrow viewing slit was the New Jersey Turnpike at night, empty and black. A ribbon of asphalt that might as well have been the river Styx. The electronic warfare vans activated their payloads as the convoy crossed into New York. The effect was immediate and absolute. Along the predetermined route, up, through Lower Manhattan, across the Brooklyn Bridge, and into the federal detention complex, every cell signal died. Not degraded, not weakened, dead. The jamming was so complete, so overwhelming that smartphones within 2 blocks of the convoy simply displayed no service or emergency calls only, their processors unable to comprehend why every tower they could detect refused to respond. Wi-Fi networks collapsed, Bluetooth connections severed, even the legacy pager systems used by some hospitals experienced interference. The official story, disseminated through carefully orchestrated leaks to the press, was that this electronic blackout was a security measure to protect the prisoner from remote assassination attempts. That was partially true, but the deeper truth, the operational reality that appeared in no press release, was simpler and more cruel. They wanted him isolated, completely, utterly isolated. They wanted to ensure that as he rolled through the nighttime streets of New York, through the city that had once welcomed him on state visits, no image of his humiliation could leak onto social media. No sympathizer could live stream his passage. No journalist could tweet his location in real time. They wanted his fall to be private. They wanted the world to forget him before he even arrived. The Brooklyn Bridge had been closed. Not officially. The NYPD would later claim it was emergency maintenance, a water main issue, structural concerns. But everyone who needed to know understood what was happening. At both ends of the bridge, concrete barriers had been positioned to create a single-lane corridor. NYPD ESU snipers occupied elevated positions on the support towers, their night vision scopes sweeping the empty span every 30 seconds. Harbor patrol boats circled in the East River below, their spotlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness, searching for any boat foolish enough to approach. As the convoy rolled onto the bridge, the prisoner caught his first glimpse of Manhattan's skyline. The financial district glittered across the water, a constellation of lit windows where the global machinery of capital never sleeps, where his nation's frozen assets sat in digital vaults, where sanctions with his name on them had been coded into compliant software years before his capture. He had seen this skyline before, of course. He had stayed in the Peninsula Hotel during a United Nations General Assembly session, had given interviews from a suite overlooking Central Park, had shaken hands with financiers who praised his nation's oil reserves while calculating how to extract maximum profit from its eventual collapse. But he had never seen it like this. Through ballistic glass, in handcuffs, as cargo. The cold wind off the East River penetrated even the sealed environment of the transport vehicle. New York in January carries a particular kind of cold, the damp chill that comes from water and concrete and the exhalations of 9 million people pressed together on an island. He could feel it seeping through the steel walls, through his thin detention jumpsuit. They had already changed him, somewhere during the processing in New Jersey, stripped away the last physical remnants of his authority and dressed him in orange fabric stamped with "Federal Prisoner" across the back. The convoy did not slow as it crossed the bridge. Every traffic light along the route had been synchronized, every intersection secured by uniformed officers who turned their backs as the vehicles passed, as if even acknowledging his presence might somehow restore a fragment of his lost power. The whole operation moved with the inexorable rhythm of a machine designed to transport dangerous objects from point A to point B, and he was the object, stripped of agency, reduced to mass and volume and security classification. The Metropolitan Detention Center loomed against the Brooklyn sky like a brutalist monument to restraint. 12 stories of brown, concrete, small rectangular windows that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A structure designed with one purpose: to hold. No architectural flourishes, no concessions to aesthetics or human comfort. Just function. Pure and absolute. The building squatted in its Sunset Park neighborhood like a predator at rest, always watching, always waiting. The convoy entered through the secure sally port, massive steel doors closing behind the prisoner transport before the forward doors opened. Layer after layer of security, each threshold a point of no return. They moved him quickly now, the marshals flanking him on all sides, hands on his arms not roughly but firmly, guiding him through corridors painted in shades of institutional beige and gray, past checkpoints where other guards watched with the studied indifference of professionals who have seen everything. The processing room was exactly what every processing room in every detention facility across America looks like. Fluorescent lights that seemed to drain color from everything they touched. A steel table bolted to the floor. A camera in the ceiling corner, red light blinking to indicate active recording. A poster on the wall listing prisoner rights in English and Spanish, the text so familiar to the staff that no one ever read it anymore. This was the moment, the core of the humiliation, the exact point where symbolism collapsed into bureaucratic reality. They made him remove everything. The marshals stood witness as he stripped away the last vestiges of identity. His clothes, expensive, tailored, selected by aides who understood the power of appearance, went into a clear plastic bag. His watch, a Swiss timepiece worth more than most American families earn in a year, dropped into a manila envelope. His wedding ring, the simple gold band that had survived 2 decades of political turmoil, sealed in a smaller envelope labeled with his prisoner number, but it was the military sash that represented the true breaking point. He had worn variations of that sash for 20 years, bright red silk adorned with medals and ribbons, each one representing a manufactured victory or fabricated honor. The elite guard had presented him with a new sash every year on the anniversary of his rise to power, each more elaborate than the last, gold thread woven into patterns that referenced historical generals and revolutionary heroes. The sash was not just decoration. It was armor. It was identity. It was the physical manifestation of authority itself. A detention officer, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes who had processed 1,000 inmates before him and would process 1,000 after, held out a clear plastic bag. Her voice was flat, empty of judgment or recognition. "The sash, sir." He hesitated. For 3 seconds, perhaps 4, he held on to that strip of silk and gold thread. His fingers tightened around it, knuckles whitening as if holding on might somehow reverse the cascade of failures that had brought him to this room, this moment, this irrevocable crossing. "Sir." The word carried no respect, only procedure. "I need you to place it in the bag." His hands opened. The sash dropped into the plastic with a whisper of fabric. The officer sealed the bag with a zip tie, scanned a barcode, and placed it on the steel table next to the envelope containing his watch. Then she held out the orange jumpsuit. The biometric scanning took 17 minutes. Fingerprints, of course, all 10 fingers, rolled and pressed against the digital scanner until the system confirmed sufficient ridge detail. Retinal scan, the light so bright he blinked tears that no one acknowledged or commented on. DNA swab, the cotton ruff against the inside of his cheek. Height measurement, weight measurement, identifying marks documented with a digital camera. A dental exam, checking for concealed items or modifications. Every measurement entered into a database, every data point, cross-referenced against intelligence files that had been compiled over years of surveillance. The intelligence officer who supervised the biometric collection was a gray-suited man who might have been anywhere from 40 to 60 years old, the kind of person who becomes invisible through sheer blandness. He reviewed the data on a tablet, scrolling through screens of information with the casual attention of someone checking email. Then he looked up, made eye contact for the first time, and spoke in a voice that carried neither triumph nor cruelty, just statement of fact. "Your encrypted communications network was compromised on December 14th. That's 11 days before your capture. We've had access to every message, every call, every digital transmission your organization made in the final days. Your intelligence chief was trying to arrange a Russian extraction. You should know that Moscow never responded to his requests. They left you hanging." The words landed like physical blows. December 14th. 11 days. They had been inside his communications network, reading his messages in real time, while he still believed himself secure. While the elite guard still maintained their protocols and encryption discipline, American signals intelligence analysts had been taking screenshots, building transcripts, mapping networks. They had watched him make plans. They had watched him believe in the loyalty of distant allies. They had watched him fail, and the Russians who had supplied his military, who had sent advisors and technicians, who had shielded him in international forums and provided the economic lifelines that sustained his regime. When his intelligence chief reached out, when he used the emergency protocols established years before, when he invoked every promise and pact and secret agreement, Moscow had simply gone silent. The Nord Stream of loyalty, it turned out, could be shut off as easily as natural gas. The intelligence officer returned to his tablet, already moving to the next item on his processing checklist. The prisoner's devastation was irrelevant data outside the scope of the current operation. They took him to his cell as dawn began to break over Brooklyn. Through the small window, he could see the sky lightening from black to gray, the quality of darkness changing in ways he had never noticed before, had never needed to notice. The cell was 8 feet by 10 feet. A steel bunk bolted to the wall. A combination toilet and sink unit molded from a single piece of stainless steel. A small shelf. A fluorescent light behind unbreakable polycarbonate. That was the inventory. That was the entire physical universe he would occupy for months, possibly years. The door closed with a sound like thunder. The camera in the ceiling corner watched him with an unblinking red eye. 24-hour surveillance, every movement recorded, every moment documented. Privacy had become another casualty, another luxury of the past. Another thing that powerful men take for granted until power evaporates like morning mist. He sat on the edge of the steel bunk and felt the cold of the metal through the thin mattress. Outside, Brooklyn was waking up. Commuters heading to the subway. Coffee shops opening. The ordinary rhythm of a city that had already forgotten his convoy, that would never know how many resources had been dedicated to his transportation, that did not care about the fall of distant autocrats. 3 weeks ago, he commanded the elite guard. 300 men whose loyalty seemed absolute, whose presence seemed permanent, whose very existence validated his power. Where were they now? Scattered, fled, arrested, dead. The careful architecture of authoritarian control had collapsed so quickly that even now, sitting in his cell, he struggled to comprehend the velocity of the fall. One day he stood on a balcony in Caracas, the thunder of devotion rising from the plaza. The next day he was in a sealed room on a warship. And now, this. The silence of the Metropolitan Detention Center is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of erasure. It is the sound of the world moving on without you, of history turning its page, of power redistributing itself to new hands and new configurations, while you sit in an 8x10 cell watching the light change through a window you cannot open. He is a number now. Prisoner 479281. That is his name in this place, his identity reduced to 6 digits in a database. The system does not care about his titles or his history or the plaza that once chanted his name. The system has processed emperors and gang leaders, terrorists and tax evaders, and to the system they are all the same. Inputs to be managed, liabilities to be contained, numbers to be tracked. Outside his cell, the facility continues its eternal routine. Meal times and count times and recreation periods measured in minutes rather than hours. Lawyers will come, eventually bringing papers that require signatures explaining procedures that stretch for years. Prosecutors are building cases, stacking charges like stones into a wall that will define the remainder of his life. Somewhere in Washington, policy analysts are writing reports that mention him only in footnotes. As an example, resolved, a problem solved, a cautionary tale for the next aspiring autocrat. The elite guard is gone. The sash is in a storage facility, cataloged and sealed, evidence in a case that may not go to trial for years. The encrypted communications that once seemed so secure are now prosecution exhibits, his own words weaponized against him by the very people he once mocked as weak, as decadent, as incapable of decisive action. Today is January 16, 2026. In Caracas, a transitional government is cataloging the damage of 20 years of authoritarian rule. In Moscow, intelligence analysts are reviewing their protocols for supporting client states, recalculating the costs and benefits of loyalty. In Brussels and Ottawa and Lima, diplomats are drafting new frameworks for regional cooperation, building systems designed to prevent another strongman from emerging. And in Brooklyn, in a cell designed to hold one human being in secure custody, a man who once commanded nations sits on a steel bunk and listens to the silence. The weight of the handcuffs may have been removed. They only use restraints during transport, but he can still feel them. Ghost weight, phantom pressure, the sense memory of powerlessness that no amount of time will fully erase. The cold wind from the East River finds its way even here, through ventilation systems and concrete walls, carrying with it the scent of water and city and the future rushing forward without him. He pulls the thin blanket around his shoulders, standard issue, identical to 10,000 other blankets in 10,000 other cells across the federal detention system. Outside, Brooklyn continues, indifferent, eternal, alive. And inside, the silence persists, not the silence of peace, but the silence of erasure. The silence of men who once commanded the thunder and now command only the boundaries of an 8x10 cell. The silence of power departed, leaving nothing behind but a number on a steel door and a slowly fading memory of plazas and guards and the illusion that authority might last forever. It never does. The camera blinks its red eye. The fluorescent light hums its tuneless song. The institution continues its function, processing human consequences with mechanical indifference. And somewhere, In filing cabinets and digital databases, in classified reports and court documents, the story of this journey is being preserved, not as legend or myth, but as precedent, as warning, as the mundane reality that awaits men who mistake fear for loyalty, who confuse performance for power, who believe that authority flows from the barrel of a gun rather than the consent of the governed. The master of the elite guard is gone. Only the prisoner remains.